My name is Major Julie Love. One of my favorite parts about CAP USAF is the cadet interactions.
I spent about 13 years active duty in the Air Force, flying primarily the F-16 and the T-38.
I go by Star, and I flew the F-15E Strike Eagle.
I was the last pilot ever trained on the C-141, which was a medevac mission.
A lot of deployments, a lot of awesome trips overseas, air refueling support, cargo support. It was really awesome.
Training is challenging, but definitely worth it.
Hello to all the cadets, seniors, parents, everybody who joined us tonight. First of all, on behalf of the CAP USAF Commander Colonel Wooten, I just want to thank all of you out there for what you're doing during the COVID response, assisting with FEMA, delivering PPE, all that you're doing in the efforts to help out the community and the country right now. It is very much appreciated, and we couldn't be more grateful to be working with all of you now. First, I'm just going to explain briefly CAP USAF and the relationship between CAP USAF and CAP. CAP USAF is the oversight for the Civil Air Patrol. They get a large grant from Congress, about $65 million, and that is basically funneled down, and there is an agreement called a cooperative agreement, and that is what we use in our partnership. And you might see us out there doing operations evaluations, or you might see us doing compliance inspections. You might also see us doing some fun things like encampments and unit visits. So we wish we could be with you more in person, but due to the circumstances, we must visit you online. So.
All right, hi everybody. My name is Maria Hall. I'm a sophomore at Texas A&M. I'm in Air Force ROTC. I'm also a member of the Corps of Cadets, and I'm studying aerospace engineering right now. I have been in Civil Air Patrol since I was 12 years old. I love it. I was also in Air Force Junior ROTC in high school. And then through Junior ROTC, I got my private pilot's license through the flight academy they offer. And so I've been flying with Civil Air Patrol. I'm working on becoming a mission pilot for them. And then I just fly for fun on my own. And so I love flying. I love everything it has to offer. And so my ultimate goal is to become a fighter pilot. And so these panelists we have on tonight, they're amazing women. They've just had amazing stories and amazing backgrounds. So ask lots of questions and just soak up as much as you can. It's great to be here.
This evening, I'm Major Suzanne Collins of the Virginia Wing, Civil Air Patrol Mid-Atlantic region. I had no previous interest in flying until I completed a degree and I was looking for another challenge. And so I took a couple of discovery flights. The first was in a Cessna 172, and I thought, okay, this is cool. And then I took a second flight in a Diamond DA-20, and then I was really hooked. I joined the Civil Air Patrol in 2008, about a year after earning my license. I had no idea CAP even existed until I visited a trade show. I served as a mission pilot for Civil Air Patrol in the 172 in support of mission equipment personnel control, movement, And outside of Civil Air Patrol, I'm instrument rated and have commercial and seaplane rating actually as well that I earned in Alaska. And I fly anything with one engine. Hopefully, as soon as restrictions are lifted, I'll be able to get some flying in the Civil Air Patrol 182 and maybe give some of our cadets and teachers orientation flights. I will be your moderator for today's session, and we look forward to your questions. So please don't be shy. This is a very rare opportunity to have CAP USAF at your doorstep. So please post your questions and let's get them talking. Again, thank you very much and have a good evening. How did you become interested in aviation?
I didn't have any aviation in my family. I didn't have military in my family, at least the last, several generations that I knew. So really, as a child, I always liked traveling. I liked being at the airports. I liked just being in an airplane, looking out the window. But it wasn't until my first semester of college where I was kind of going through this freshman year, mid-semester, my first semester, wondering, what I actually want to do. And Arizona State's really close to Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, obviously a really busy airport, and the airplanes are always going by on final approach. And it was just this like light bulb moment one day where I saw an airline go by and I'm like, that's what I want to do. And from there, I hadn't really ever thought about it before. So I was looking into military versus civilian, and I ultimately chose to go the military way. And I'm so glad I did, but it was completely foreign to me. So like Jackie said earlier, all of you in Civil Air Patrol right now and doing JROTC and all of that, you're way ahead of the curve. You're way ahead of where I was and many others. So I think everybody just finds their path and their passion and their reason at their own pace. So mine was a little bit different.
I knew, like Julie said, I always wanted to travel, and it was an exciting life. I come from a family of travelers, and my mom asked me, well, if you want it, she was a flight attendant for Pan Am back in the golden years. She was on the first 747 across the Atlantic Ocean. She said, well, if you want to travel, why not sit in the front seat? It's a better view. So she kind of put that seed in me. And as I became a private pilot, just like Maria, I wanted to serve. I wanted to serve for in the Air Force, and a good option was the Air Force Reserves. So that is similar to you guys as cadets, where you can put on the uniform part-time and you can still go to school. So I joined the Air Force Reserves and I was able to do both. So to this day, I'm so proud to be Air Force pilot and also be a civilian as well. So that's how I got my start.
Okay. What is the best advice that you have for a young audience in terms of becoming a pilot?
No matter what you're doing, pilot training or anything else you want to do, it's really important to approach it with humility and a little bit of a thick skin. So going through pilot training and then IFF and then learn to fly the F-16 and then a wingman upgrade, a flight lead upgrade, an instructor upgrade, a forward air controller airborne upgrade. I mean, there's millions and millions and millions of times where I was told how bad I was and what I did wrong and what I need to do better. And there's a small handful of times when I was told what I did right. So it's all just to make you better. And our time is limited when we're learning. So we don't really focus on what you're doing right. We focus on what you did wrong to try and get it better. So if you go into it with a mindset of you don't know what you're doing and you're going to do everything wrong, and just because someone is telling you what you did wrong doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means you need to be humble and teachable. That's the best mindset and the best advice I would give a young person today.
Do you have any advice for a junior in high school trying to become a pilot for the Air Force?
My advice to anyone in high school is try to be around other people that want to talk about airplanes, that are just as passionate about flying, whether it's sneaking around your local airfield. You're all obviously doing that by being members of the Civil Air Patrol. So I think you're on the right start, but ask questions. I know there were times where I didn't either know what questions to ask, or I just thought maybe everyone else knew those answers. And the reality is that it's just starting a conversation with someone, and you'll start to see what, they'll want. If you talk to someone about flying, they will talk to you all day about their experiences. So just start that conversation with the people around you that have that are pilots or that are doing the same career path that you're interested in, and don't be scared to ask even the silly questions, because most people around you also have those same questions. And if you can fly, take advantage of all the opportunities that you have in the Civil Air Patrol. So get your orientation rides. If you can attend any of the encampments and get yourself in the air, or just even as simple as flying a simulator, download, the sim, or if you have one available within your squadron, get to see if you enjoy it, if it's something that you like to do. And that, I think, is a great place to start.
Okay, and a follow on to that question, how old were you when you got your pilot's license?
So I was 17 when I got my pilot's license, and that's actually the minimum age you need to get your private pilot's license. So the Air Force was super generous, and they sent me and about 100 other junior ROTC cadets from across the nation, and they 100% paid for us to get our pilot's license. So I got mine when I was 17, and it was at Purdue University.
Nice.
So there was another question asking, what FA certificates do you need to have to be a pilot in the Air Force, whether it's instrument, private, or commercial? I'll go ahead and jump in on that one. As the panelists have already said, we have individuals that start with practically zero time, and we have others like Colonel Fleming that was already a flight instructor. And so it's a matter of, how much of your own money do you want to spend versus the Air Force's? The more ratings you have, yes, you have more experience, but as it was also mentioned by Frags, you have perhaps, some habits to unlearn before you get in the Air Force way. So having at least, your pilot experience, at least the initial, to understand the basics and whatnot, it gives you an advantage. But then after that, maybe it may be less painful for you to just, do the Air Force way and get through the ratings, in their system. So to anyone else on the panel, what classes did you take in high school that you think prepared you for the career you have today?
So the class was an aviation ground school class. Basically, it was the private pilot ground school class is essentially what it was. And it was just an extra science credit. If I hadn't taken that class just to kind of expand my horizons, I definitely would not be here today. I know most high schools probably don't offer that opportunity, but I guess I would say that to just leverage, to try new things. And if you ever had a chance to get up in an airplane or shadow any career, you should take it.
This one is also again for Cadet Hall. Someone's asking, how difficult was it to be in CAP as well as JROTC?
ROTC has been more of a time commitment. Civil Air Patrol, I've been able to balance it. Civil Air Patrol is just 1 week or 1 day out of the week. So I like to say you get out what you put in. So you can be as involved as you want. So you can join a lot of activities and organizations, or you can take a step back and focus your attention on one or the other. For me, it's just been a balance. I've been able to enjoy both equally. So if you're a hard worker, if you're determined, I think you can get a great experience from both organizations.
Okay.
So we have a freshman in high school who's also in CAP and just started AF JROTC and also volunteers in the community. Wants to know what else they can do to stand out for Academy or ROTC scholarships.
First of all, it's great that you're showing interest so early. I would say don't overextend yourself, because what we do want to see is that you can take on leadership roles and actually have accomplishments to show for those leadership titles. It doesn't necessarily matter that you were the leader of Air Force JROTC if you can't tell me that you actually led some sort of project that went successfully or impacted your peers in some way. I would say definitely have good grades, take your tests as much as possible. If you can find some way to be athletically involved, that is also good. You don't have to play a varsity sport, but there are tests you have to take to be admitted and tests while you're at the academy that you need to be physically fit for. You can apply for summer programs also at the academy, but I'd say you're definitely on a good start, and just keep doing what you do like to do. Don't feel like you have to do both Civil Air Patrol and Junior ROTC. You can go to the academy not having done either. So just keep going with what you like and try to get leadership positions.
What catches your eye when you're looking at an applicant's resume?
First, I'll say if you go to the Air Force Academy website, it does a good breakdown of what we're actually looking at as far as your academics and your extracurriculars and whatnot. So I won't go into that a lot because you can get that from the website. But what I'll say when we do interviews, and actually I've sat on the board. So if you're not aware, to get in the Air Force Academy, you also need a nomination from like a senator or a congressman. And so that actually is your first big step. So what I would recommend is find out who your congressman is and go meet them. Try to have a meeting. Sometimes they have special events or special programs for up and coming leaders. And so if you can get that in, that will really help you get that nomination. When we're sitting on the nomination board, and I'm just an advisor at this point, honestly, the first thing they're looking at is your SAT, ACT, because there's so many people that are so smart. If you're not up there in the high ranks for those, as is a normal person, then then you're not going to be competitive. People that might have a little bit more into the academy, or if you had a lot of diversity in your background, or if you are, if you had a lot of obstacles that you had to overcome. So maybe, let's say you didn't get the best grade and you weren't valedictorian, but you supported your mom because she was a single mom, and you worked and you did this and this and this. It's that grit, right? So the academy is looking for grit. So you'll see that in the interview that you'll do. They're really looking for that. So the last thing I will say is leadership. So obviously you are all on Civil Air Patrol, and that's awesome. They're going to love seeing that you love flying. They're going to love seeing that you are involved in a military aspect, that you know the Air Force world, but they're going to really look for leadership, and if they want you to be the top of that leadership chain. And then athletics, that's the big thing. To go to the Air Force Academy, it's everybody's athlete. So if you are you're lettering in any athletic program, that's going to be huge points for you also.
Awesome.
Major Wall, how much consideration does the Academy give to applicants in college?
They give a lot of consideration. I would say about 30% of applicants that get into the Air Force Academy are second-time applicants. That means they did not get in through high school, or they were in college. Even in ROTC, you can, if you are in the ROTC program, you can still apply to the Academy, and your commander can give you a nomination. So we also have scholarships. So if you apply to the Academy and you don't get into the Academy, you're automatically looked at for the prep school. And if you don't get into prep school, then there's 5 other scholarships. They'll actually pay for you to go to just a civilian college. There's about 8 you can choose from. And then they'll pay for either a year or semester, and that will help you prepare more to get into college. And if there's any homeschoolers here, they actually recommend you go to college, so you are kind of used to that classroom environment.
What are the best questions to ask recruiters when you're trying to get into this type of career?
They should be giving you a lot of options. And I would say that you must stay persistent. If you really want to fly, that's what you want to do, stay persistent. Persistence is a key attribute here to get where you want to be, being a pilot, talking with a recruiter, because in the Air Force, we'd love for you to join and do all kinds of things, but be persistent in your goals. Go ahead, Kristen.
I can't speak to active duty wise because, like I said earlier in my introduction, I actually joined the Air National Guard and went through pilot training with them. So my process in first talking to a recruiter was different. So it starts out, if you know what Air National Guard unit you want to join, which I started that process by figuring out who has F-16s, since I knew for sure that's what I wanted to fly. And then I would start calling the recruiters at every one of those different units I was interested in and talk to them and started asking them, hey, when are you holding your next pilot hiring board? And they were able to help you by giving you information about when the pilot hiring board was going to happen. They would help you figure out what different items you needed to put together in your folder that the pilot hiring board would look at, such as resume, letters of recommendation, transcripts, and such. And then they would help you get scheduled to go take your AFOQT test. And there's another one that goes along with it that, keep in mind, I did this about 24 years ago, so it's just a little bit different these days, but there's one more test that goes along with it these days. So process of talking to a recruiter, very different active duty compared to guard or reserve, depending on which track you choose.
Okay, another question. Why did you choose to go to the Academy?
So growing up, I had gone to the Air and Space Museum. My dad had taken me to air shows. So while he wasn't in aviation, he took me to see those things, and I really grew a passion for it. And I would say early on, I learned about the Air Force Academy, and I kind of fell in love with it, and that's where I had wanted to go from a pretty young age. The things that I liked about it is that they had a great engineering program. I mean, great academics. And I actually had looked at the Naval Academy and the Air Force Academy, and I was able to visit both. But when I went to the Air Force Academy, there were gliders outside flying all day long in the mountains, and that was really what turned me on to saying, yes, this is absolutely where I want to go. It's pretty cool to be at a school where there's airplanes flying over all the time, there's flyovers, there's people jumping out of airplanes, some amazing opportunities in academics. People love cadets, so they always want to do things with you, take you places. So really, really cool experiences overall. Also, if you really want to fly, you have a pretty good opportunity to get a pilot slot as long as you're medically qualified and you have good enough grades at the academy. So as far as pilot slots go every year, they give about half to the academy. It's probably like 40 to 45% to the academy, 40 to 45% to ROTC, and then somewhere in that 10, 15% or so to officer training school. So there's more pilot slots going to a smaller pot if you go to the Air Force Academy, but you also tend to get a lot more people that want to fly versus do some of the other career fields. So it's a toss-up of where you go, but those were some of the main reasons why I chose to go to the academy.
Is it scary going to the Air Force Academy after just leaving high school?
Terrifying. I chose to go to the Air Force Academy because I thought it would make me a more well-rounded person, and I was right. That was kind of a ridiculous reasoning. I actually didn't have any interest in aviation going in. I just liked that it would be a challenge and that it would be like a step up from a regular college. But then everyone I met said they wanted to be a pilot, and I thought there must be something to this. So yeah, I was lucky that I could do the glider program and see, but it is intimidating. I wasn't used to people yelling at me. I had never done any military type training before, but you just have to remind yourself why you're there and what your goals are.
Are there particular types of degrees that one should look at, whether it's a Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Science? Basically, what's the most useful degree for a pilot?
Yeah, so I would say it doesn't matter, first of all. Like when I was in ROTC, we had criminal justice majors and we had aeronautical engineering majors and everything in between. Like I said, I studied meteorology. My best advice would be study what you're interested in. The Air Force doesn't really care what you get your degree in, so take that opportunity to study something that interests you. Obviously you want to make sure that you do well at it. I wouldn't say that means to go pick the easiest, degree to get just so you get a 4.0, but pick something, middle of the road that really interests you, that you'll be engaged in, because once you go to pilot training, the Air Force is going to be teaching you all the flying stuff, and that's going to be your career. So just, like I said, take advantage of that. It doesn't matter. I know for meteorology, for me, had I not been selected for a pilot slot, or for whatever reason I couldn't do it medically, the weather officer was high in demand back when I was in ROTC. So I would have gone to weather officer if I didn't get selected for a rated position like pilot or navigator. So some majors, and it always changes based on the needs of the Air Force, will direct you toward a certain career field if you don't get a pilot slot or a navigator slot or any of the rated slots. So,
is it hard to do ROTC while studying in college?
Okay. So for me personally, I tell a lot of people that you get out what you put in. So you can be as involved as you want. Or you can take a step back. You can really focus on academics, but also have that real central ROTC experience. So it's honestly up to you. You can join teams. You can get involved with leading different projects and different people. So it's really up to you. But for me, it's just been a fine balance. So it really hasn't been that hard juggling ROTC in school for me. But I'll let Major Love give her input.
Well, no, Maria, that was an awesome answer. And I think you have the most recent experience, obviously, going through it currently. But just thinking back to when I went through it, I went to, like I said, Arizona State, and that's a huge school. And what I liked about what ROTC did was it made that school seem so much smaller. So I made a lot of friends right off the bat, that we were all in the same group together for ROTC, even though we all had different majors. Like I was friends with political science majors, engineering majors, I was meteorology, everything, because it doesn't necessarily matter in ROTC what you major in. So that was a cool benefit of ROTC, especially if you go to a large school. Also, like Maria said, you can be as involved as you want. Obviously, the more involved you're in, I'm pretty sure it's still like this,
You get a little bit more, credit, I guess, if you're trying to compete for specific, pilot slots, other jobs that are harder to get. That visibility helps you, but you can be as involved as you want up to a certain point. And they also really worked with us, at least at Arizona State back then. Like if we were having trouble, they would really work out with you if you were struggling in classes. Like a lot of my engineering friends were just taking math like the whole 4 or 5 years they were in school, and it's not easy. So we had a good support system as well. So that was the big point I wanted to make, is that ROTC is extra from what the normal college student does, but you have like this huge support system that I think makes up for that. It makes it more than worth it. So.
What was your reaction during your first flight? Initially, it was one of, I guess, being slightly overwhelmed, seeing all the instrumentation on the cockpit panel. But then I started focusing on just the experience and, lifting off in the air, and then the instructor giving me the control that says, hey, you can, fly the airplane yourself, see how you like it. And then I realized it wasn't so scary, and that just like with a car, you have to understand, what the instruments are telling you, and then, act accordingly with the airplane. But my experience, it was an awesome one, and it's one I still remember like it was yesterday.
So I'll just make a quick comment. Mine isn't necessarily about my first flight, but I do distinctly remember my first solo in a 152, my first solo in a T-37, and then the first time I stepped out to a Viper. I was always just filled with a sense of like amazement and wonder, because this is the one thing I had wanted to do since I was 8 years old. And stepping out to the F-16 for the first time, I was so excited I almost started crying, and I was like, whoa, like chill out, they're gonna make fun of you for crying. But I was just so excited and so happy that I finally accomplished my goal. So it's those things that you'll never forget, and if it's really something you want to do, it's definitely worth all of the hard work that goes into it.
Were you scared the first time you flew solo?
So the first time I went on my solo, my instructor gets out of the aircraft and shuts the door. And here I go, very nervous, down the runway, full power. And I break ground and I get airborne, and all of a sudden there's this bang, 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 the loudest noise you would ever hear. I thought my engine was exploding, something was wrong. I have never heard that before. It was really scary. I maintained my composure. I knew it must have been some sort of emergency. So I continued to fly around the pattern. I came back down, I landed. I still didn't know what my emergency was. It turns out that my instructor had left his seatbelt outside the door and shut the door with the big metal seatbelt banging against the side of the aircraft as I took off. So that was my big emergency. As I took off, it was a scary moment, but it all turned out okay, and made me a better pilot because of it. So that was the first time I ever went flying solo, and it turned out okay.
So the first time I was going to play by myself was in the glider. So the gliders don't have an engine. It's an academy. And so you're attached to this coplane. You're going up, and as you're going up, it's really loud and kind of bumpy. So by myself. But then you release this knob, and then you separate from that Cessna, and then it's quiet, and you're like a bird. And it's the most amazing experience. So I'm gliding, and all of a sudden I was like, holy cow, I'm in this plane by myself, and I don't have an engine. And so then I start singing, like, Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And, I don't know why, but I started singing it. And then, all the training that I had, the whole 2 weeks of training I had, my only experience of playing prior to this. So I'm focusing now on my gate and bidding, and I landed it. I was like, holy cow, that was awesome. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life.
The question that came up was, what process did you have to go through to be a pilot in the Air Force, up to your specific MOS?
Okay, Stick, go for it.
All right, I saw that question come in, so I've been sitting here writing everything out, so hopefully I don't miss anything. Some things may have changed slightly since I went through, so I think Star might be our resident expert on some changes, and she may want to pile in on some differences you might see if you're trying to pursue it. But so I did ROTC in college, was my path to a commission, and I competed for a pilot slot there. which typically happens around your junior year. I know I found out when I was a junior that I got a pilot slot, and then flight screening at the time was just going down to your local FBO and flying 50 hours. So I did that between my junior and senior year, and I know flight screening has changed, so that'll be one of the big differences. So I got my private pilot's license during that for flight screening. And then after I graduated college, I went straight to pilot training at Laughlin Air Force Base. That's about a year long. I wasn't a casual anywhere, and I didn't really have any delays in my training pipeline. Halfway through pilot training, since I was active duty, I wasn't guard or reserve, so I didn't know what airframe I was going to. I track selected into the fighter bomber track, and then there was also a helicopter track or the transport track. So I was, did well enough and was lucky enough. Favor went in my way, and I was able to get in the fighter bomber track. And then after about a full year of the pilot training pipeline, I track selected in, I was able to get the F-16. After initial pilot training, if you're going the fighter route, you go to a course called Introduction to Fighter Fundamentals, where you fly the T-38C model and learn some basic fighter maneuvering, air-to-air and air-to-ground if you're doing a multi-role fighter. So I did that at Moody Air Force Base, and then I did my survival training before I went to my basic course. So I did water survival in Pensacola, Florida. I did survival, evasion, resistance, and escape training at Fairchild Air Force Base near Spokane. And then I finally went to my F-16 basic course in Phoenix, Arizona. After about 9 months there, I qualified F-16 pilot, and I went to my first operational assignment in Alaska, but I was not yet a combat qualified fighter pilot. So I did more training there for my mission qualification training. And after just over 2 years total for the training pipeline, I was finally a combat mission ready wingman in the F-16. Through the process, I flew the T-37 first, then the T-38A model in pilot training, and then I flew the T-38C model in IFF, and then the F-16.
Are you available? You have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would say that my experience was similar, but there is another path for people to go to pilot training. If you interview with a Guard or Reserve squadron and they want to hire you, you can go through the required testing and officer training as long as you have a college degree to get hired into a Guard or Reserve squadron and get a pilot training slot and know going into pilot training what your assigned weapon system will be. So there's another avenue to get into pilot training other than commissioning through like the Air Force Academy or a university as well. That's another way to go that route.
There's so many different paths to becoming a pilot. Let's say your goal is to go to the Air Force Academy because they tend to get the most, per capita pilot training spots. You don't get into the academy, you go to ROTC. You don't get a spot out of ROTC, so you end up joining and still commissioning. There are still ways once you're active duty to apply to become a pilot. We have enlisted members who have been able to commission and then go on to fly, and like you mentioned, there's reserve or Guard or Reserve opportunities as well. So it seems often like there's only one path to becoming a pilot, but I think you'll just see from the experiences of everyone on this panel, there's a lot of different ways to get there. So if one of those paths doesn't work out for you, don't be scared to ask around and learn about all the other different paths. And obviously we're just one service. There's so many other opportunities to fly, even in other services or civilians. Talk to Suzanne. She's got some great stories of her flight as well, just with Civil Air Patrol. So,
have you had to overcome air sickness?
That get sick, because it's not something to be embarrassed about. It's not something to get upset about, because it happens all the time. And you're putting your body through a complete different physiological environment, and your body's got to adjust to it. You have these little tubes inside your ears called otolith tubes. And what Jackie was talking about was something called a Barony chair. And she's right. If you get actively airsick in pilot training, they will take you to aerospace physiology, and they will put you in that chair, and they will spin you and spin you and spin you until your body just gives up and it says, okay, it's fine. I don't mind these little otolith tubes not telling me where X, Y, and Z axis are. They also have several other mechanisms by which to help you get over it. But the biggest thing to recognize is that you can get over it, and don't let the mental portion of that take over the physical portion of it. That I also will tell you, I'll be honest with you, that I have known people to withdraw from pilot training because they feel like they can't get over it. So it's I don't want to scare you. I don't want you to be afraid of it, but it's real. And there are a lot of people who have gone through it. And there are probably on this panel, there are probably several people who know people that threw up in their helmet bags while they were flying because they were sick. So not a big deal, and it's very overcomable.
Question is, I know that becoming a pilot is difficult, and exciting as it is, what was it like as a woman learning and competing for seats to become a pilot?
Well, I think it's a two-part question. I think the second part was maybe more toward when you're in ROTC or if you're at the Air Force Academy or however you do it. When we competed in ROTC anyway, it really didn't matter if you were male or female. We all were scored along the same lines, things like GPA, leadership activities, physical fitness. There's some tests you have to take, which I believe probably has changed, and I'm sure our ALOs can help us out with that in a little bit on how that actually works now. But everything was just the same. Everybody was graded on that level, and then you received a score and were chosen to either go to pilot training, or if you didn't hit that score out of how many pilots they needed, then you went and did another job. Now, once I got to pilot training, like I've said in previous panels, I never really thought much about the fact that I was the only female in my class. It just really didn't occur to me, at least now that I think back on it, I don't think it did. I do think a little bit I put extra pressure on myself, and that's something that I think every pilot training student does. So my advice for that, whether you're male or female or just worried about putting all that pressure in a difficult endeavor, just put that aside. Just focus on improving every time, learning, asking questions. Don't be afraid to know that you're going to have a bad day here and there. All that stuff really doesn't have anything to do with being a female, but being a female in a pilot training class was awesome. Everybody was great. I didn't have a bad experience at all. All my classmates were like brothers to me. I talk to a lot of them still. They're very supportive, and I had no issues. I don't know if anybody else can weigh in on that, but my experience was great, and my big advice is just not really to think much on it. The Air Force and military in general is very accepting of females, and they want to promote it, and they want to see you succeed.
That's great. That is very
okay. Has there been a point in your life when someone told you you would not be able to achieve your dreams?
That's tough. I think, that's going to happen probably in any career. I think it's not necessarily pilot specific. There aren't a lot of women pilots, but I did not specifically get told that. I had a lot of support and encouragement from my family, from my mentors, not necessarily women. Most of my mentors were men. But I did not experience that. But I encourage you all, if you do experience that, to keep going, pursue your dreams. Nothing good is easy, so it's going to take some work. But I did not get that in my training. Anybody else out there?
So I'll add, Jackie.
Sure. Go ahead, start.
So I feel the same way. I had a lot of encouragement growing up to do whatever it is that I wanted to pursue in life. And I don't think I really had anyone tell me, no, you can't do it. I'd say probably the biggest barrier for everyone out there is yourself. Is you telling yourself that you could do it. And I know there's times that I've said, oh, I can't do this, or these are the barriers, but as long as you almost can be the biggest barrier. And if there are people out there, I mean, whether it's society or people in your family that say you can't do it, you just have to ignore those and get over it and tell yourself that you can do it and find other people that have done it to be your mentors or to talk to. So that would be my advice on that.
So what barriers did you face during flight training and how did you overcome them?
Sure. So I will, like I said earlier, one of the biggest barriers was myself. And I will share one of the stories that that helped me get through pilot training. And this was actually when I was learning how to fly gliders at the Air Force Academy. And keep in mind, I'd even had my private pilot's license going into this, but I struggled landing the glider. And I remember telling a friend at the time that, God, I suck at flying today, and I have to do well for all the other girls, otherwise they're going to think girls suck, because there were only 5 or 6 of us. And that person looked at me and was like, what? Like, nobody thinks that. And it took that comment for me to say, I don't have to prove myself for everybody else out there. I just have to prove myself, prove that I can fly for myself. So my flying ability doesn't reflect the girl next to me or the boy next to me. And I really learned that going into something like pilot training with confidence, with the thought that you are going to fail. I've failed check rides, I've failed sorties, I have messed up plenty of times while flying, but you have to really go into it learning and not kind of bearing the extra weight of failure, and just taking it one step at a time and going on to your next sortie, and you will get better. And even after sucking landing a glider, you might fly fighter someday.
Well, in training itself, I agree with Star. I think a growth mentality is super important. A lot of times, like I hooked, I failed my first big contact check ride. I had done well up till then, and they say never do anything dumb, dangerous, or different, but for some reason you get on that check ride and you just think that I wanted to be perfect. And so I did something different that I shouldn't have. And I went out the bottom of the airspace on an aerobatic maneuver because I was trying to do it better than I had before. And I hooked it, and it was just pretty crushing. And there were other times too. I mean, I hooked plenty of rides, and it was always just stressful because you're a type A person, you've gotten to this point and you just really, really, really want to get that fighter track, or you just really, really want to get that aircraft, and you know it's pretty life-changing if you don't. So I think if I could talk to myself back, in those days, I would say just relax, you're fine, it's okay to mess up. It's more important what you do after that fact.
What do you believe is the thing that most pilots struggle with throughout the selection and training phases prior to becoming operational?
I guess the biggest thing I see, I get the students that are brand new, and of course they want to do everything they can. Most of them are active duty assignables that are going to be competing for which aircraft they get to fly. And I see a lot of students make the mistake of trying to basically almost limit their exposure to things because they could potentially be graded down for that, right? So maybe something's, I don't know how to explain this right, but like, I guess if you're driving on your driver's ed test, right, like you only had to pass like a 3-point turn and backing around a corner, not necessarily parallel parking. So you might not practice that because it's not required. But I think that it really limits students, especially early on, if they don't just like get out there with their training, with their claws out and like, I want to be exposed to everything, everything that I'm allowed to do, we call it opted to do. I think that students should be attempting it in order to expose themselves to the most airmanship that they can get. So I think that's what I see, especially some of the maybe average to slightly below average. Yes, they definitely need to be focusing on, just passing at that point. But I think that the cumulative effects of not, exposing themselves to other scenarios, situations in flying because they're just, trying to limit the chances of getting a downgrade start to catch up to them later on.
So in my time in pilot training, I know there's a lot of instructors here. I would get the students who, after hooking a couple of rides, I would do like a progress check with them to see if they were able to continue. And I had a lot of female pilots, and their flying was good, but they didn't have a lot of confidence. And so after 4 years of this, I started seeing like the boys like were not great flyers necessarily. I mean, it varies, but by the time I got them, like they were just really bad. But they just did everything very confidently, and they said the wrong answer very confidently. I'm like, well, that's wrong, but I'm glad the girls would have the right answer, but they're like, well, I think maybe it's this. I'm like, well, is it or not? Well, I'm not sure, but it was always the right answer. And so, I mean, we even started a couple of female pilot groups just to try to get the confidence up in those girls. Like, hey, you guys are smart. You know how to fly. You know the right answer. You just have to be confident in your ability to do that. With that said, too, humility is also a big thing, especially going to the Air Force Academy. Every cadet that I've talked to after the first year, like, what was the hardest part? And it was being basically the academy, and ROTC is probably the same way. They break you down as an individual to build you up as a team. And so if you have any pride issues or like, hey, like, you know, I am the boss and like, I'm gonna tell you what to do. And, you know, especially, you know, as females, there's a hard balance with leadership. And it's like, hey, I don't have to be bossy to be the boss type of thing. Like, you are leading by example. So be good, you know, be smart, be confident in your ability, but do it with humility. If you can figure that out, then everything else is easy, right?
I have kind of a funny challenge when I started. It was when I went to pilot training. I was already an instructor at that point, so I loved the flying. I appreciated every moment. The fact that the Air Force would give me this twin jet to go fly by myself and go upside down was incredible. I'm forever grateful for that. But when I had to put on a helmet and a visor and an oxygen mask, I wasn't used to that. So one of the techniques that they suggested was to wear it around in your dorm room and just kind of open it up so you could breathe. So yes, I was that pilot trainee that wore this helmet with my mask just around in my own dorm room, trying to get used to the feel of that. So there are techniques to overcome. Your instructors will give them to you, whatever that may be. So just work hard at whatever it might be during that time, and you'll find success. We got good instructors, incredible planes, and neat opportunities to fly. So.
Oh, do you get to choose your aircraft you want to fly, or is it assigned to you? Everybody.
Okay, this one's going to have a couple of answers. And I'll go ahead and start with the basics. If you sign up in the Air Force Reserve or Guard, you sign up to go work for a unit that has an assigned aircraft. So you kind of know your destiny. If you go into the active duty, these ladies will tell you that there's a lot of hard work involved to be able to earn that right to choose your aircraft. And even if you are the number one, it might not be available. So again, the needs of the Air Force. However, within that statement, if you work really hard, you will earn the privilege of having a choice if available.
Probably the biggest thing is you might have your heart set on something, or you might really want to be somewhere or do something, and you might end up in a T6 and be like, I never want to go upside down again. And it might not be for you. Or you might have your heart set on something and not get it. But at the end of the day, part of wearing your uniform is figuring out how to grow where you're planted. And all of us can look around and look at our own careers, and the first squadron that we went to is still and will always and forever be our favorite squadron, because you grew there, and that's where you blossomed as a young lieutenant or a young captain, and you grew into that career field.
So what would you say is the best part of being a pilot?
Okay, well, there are a lot of cool things, and I'm sure others will piggyback on it. It's a great job if you like to travel, obviously. If you like to, like, if you go fighters, you know, you have a Star and Foxy can talk to that. You have that certain type of flying, going upside down and doing all that cool stuff. Or what I do was on the KC-10, I had the crew, and I liked that aspect of working with others and that sort of mission set. So what's cool about being a pilot is you can do a bunch of different types of flying once you kind of figure out what you want to do. So it's not just like sitting in an airliner or sitting in a fighter. It's everything in between that. And I think that's really cool. And even civilian experiences, there are a lot of cool civilian jobs out there if you choose not to go military. So I think that's awesome. If you see yourself not being somebody that wants to sit in an office and you're not really a computer or spreadsheet person, or that sort of person that wants to work a 9 to 5, I think being a pilot is an awesome choice for those. And I think at a young age, you kind of know if you're that person, whether or not you subconsciously admit that. I think you just start to do things in high school jobs and college in which you study that kind of point you in that direction. And I think being a pilot's really good for those sort of people that want to just, if you see something different every day in a very unique way, just like what everybody was saying about their solo flights. And any mission that you do, any flight, there's just always something different, and you're always learning something, and you're always being humbled and challenged. And so I think those are the big benefits of being a pilot, outside of just the usual like things people tell you, like traveling and all of that. So
yeah, so for me, I just it's hard to put into words, but just the feeling you get when it's just you and the airplane, and you're the one in command, you're the one controlling this flying machine, and 5,000 feet up in the air. And I just fly smaller planes, so like Cessna 172s and like Diamond 40s. So I haven't even flown the big Air Force jets or planes yet, but there's just something so special about the thrill of flying, the community, the challenge of flying, that just makes flying so unique and so special. And I especially loved what Major Love said about it, the people you meet flying, men, women, cargo planes, small planes. It's just an incredible group. So I always, just like the first time you fly, chances are you might catch the flying bug, and you absolutely know that you want to make a career out of it. So it's a really special thing, and I cannot encourage you more to just go out and do a discovery flight and see if this is something that you'd like to make a career out of.
Question is, how does being a reserve pilot differ from being an active duty pilot in regards to what you fly?
The main difference is the time that you serve. So the time that you're required to give is less in the Air Force Reserves than if you are active duty, you are full time. So that is your main job. All of us on this panel, we have other jobs. So we are full time, like you guys go to school and then you participate in CAP occasionally. That is what we do as reservists. As far as the actual airframe and platform, there is no difference. I think historically you would see the Guard and the reserves take on maybe older fleets, but with the total force concept, that is no longer the case anymore. We have reserve units picking up brand new KC, the 767 model. We do have a lot of Guard and reserve units acquiring new equipment. So there really isn't a difference. And like these women have said, we are all trained the same. So whether you are Guard or reserve, you are going through an active duty pilot training course. So we train equally, and then we go to our respective flying units. There is no difference in the equipment. It is what it is in the reserves, and the active duty is the same. And the structure is the same all throughout training, and then your life after you're qualified will be different. So you will be flying less, you will be activated for certain contingencies, and then you would participate full time, but you would also have a civilian job. So,
for anyone else on the panel, what is the most rewarding thing you have done in the Air Force?
The most rewarding mission I ever had was my medevac mission during the wars, when we carried wounded soldiers and deceased bodies back from the war. That was probably the most patriotic and rewarding mission I got to be a part of. It was very, very humbling and very honored that I got to do that. So it was a unique experience. I'll never have that again, but very proud of that. So Frags, over to you. What is the most rewarding thing that you've got to do?
You may find this as a very interesting response, but I will actually tell you that my time as an instructor is absolutely the most rewarding thing that I have done. I mean, I've been able to drop bombs and blow things up and do all kinds of things that no one else will ever have the opportunity to do. But to see, again, that's a teacher in me, and that's my background, but to see the light come on and to watch people like you be so excited about flying and about learning and about figuring out how to think at 6 miles a minute, by far, probably the most rewarding thing I've done in the Air Force.
Okay. What do you like the most about flying? And please, not everyone all at once.
Okay, Major Love, go ahead.
All right, what do I like the most about flying? I like a lot of things, honestly. I like the travel. I like just the opportunities that you get, the training that I got. All of that was awesome. But I think what I like most, I went and flew KC-10, like I said, and that was a crew airplane. And I just really like the dynamic of working with another pilot. I had a flight engineer in the KC-10, and then we had a boom operator, and he's the one that would go back all the way in the back and refuel the airplanes. And there are just situations at times where you really had to work together, and you didn't necessarily know the flight engineer's whole job. You didn't necessarily know the boom operator's job, and you all had to have this mutual level of trust to solve a problem. If you had like an abnormal problem with the airplane or an emergency, or you were trying to get the airplane going and there was a maintenance issue, and you all had to collaborate and make sure that the airplane was actually good to go. There's just so much problem solving, aside from the obvious love of technically flying the airplane and traveling, that I just loved. And for me, it was just the teamwork. And after a really long day of flying 10, 12 hours, landing and being able to go and hang out with my crew and kick back and relax after all that hard work, I think the whole culmination of that is my favorite part.
What about you, Major Collins? What do you love about flying? Let's throw that one back on you.
Okay. What I love about flying is basically just the journey, getting there, the flight planning, getting up in the air and heading to some far off destination that I've planned, and successfully completing that mission, and of course returning back to base. It's just the takeoff, the landing, and talking to ATC, and all of it. It's just being up there and in control of this machine. It's the most awesome experience. And I highly recommend any of you who are thinking of, becoming a pilot, get a discovery flight. If you're in Civil Air Patrol, try and get an O-ride and see if it's for you. Once you are in it, you wouldn't look back.
Awesome. And I will add one short, small thing to that as well. Just a little note is one of my favorite things to do in a plane. Now, frags can probably do this in about less than 1 second, but if you've ever flown in an aircraft, even as a passenger, and it's overcast and raining and the weather is bad, and you shoot up through that weather and all of a sudden you break out into sunshine. That's a pretty cool feeling. We can't do it as fast as frags, but we all get there. And when you're above those clouds and you see that sunshine, it's a magnificent sight. So one of my little favorites about it.
I agree with all the things that were said so far, aside from the romantic things I totally agree, just getting up there, and once you punch through those clouds, and I always feel like I'm special because I got to see the sun today when you're in those places where a lot of people don't, but aside from that, when I separated from the Air Force, I actually went through kind of a career, pivot point where I was like, what do I want to do? And I feel like flying is it's the one place where I'm not really thinking about anything else besides flying, because my mind's always kind of on 5 different things at once, except when I'm flying, I'm just thinking about what I'm doing. I'm not thinking about my kids or my husband or anything else. And then likewise, when I'm done with that job, I'm not really like thinking about that leftover project that's back at work. I'm not thinking about, you have to study to keep up and be a level of professionalism, but I don't have these things hanging over me, this homework cloud when I'm home from work. I can just, on the other side, be present with my family and not feel that pressure, I guess, of other things that are being left over. So that's why I stayed in flying when I kind of had a point where I could sort of do something else.
What has been your longest route being refueled?
Yeah, so for me, it would be, I'm not sure if it's Hawaii to Washington, D.C., or if it's South Carolina to Spain, or maybe Alaska to Japan. But all of them are just under 12 hours. So we typically have a duty stop of 12 hours from starting up to shutting down. So I've approached that limit a couple of times in the F-16. It's a bit difficult to peel yourself out of the cockpit and after that length of a sortie.
Well, how about Major Milazzo? Have you had a long sortie like that? Have you had a long flight as you refuel these fighter pilots across the ocean or going to a different continent?
Yeah, and I will say, I would not characterize any of our flights as boring. There's always a lot of activity, and the highlights of those long sorties are those times when you get to refuel the people in the fighter aircraft who are going out and doing show force and supporting the troops on the ground. Those are always really rewarding missions for us. I think depending on your crew makeup, you can fly up to 24 hours in an augmented crew day. And I think the longest sortie I had, including refueling off of another KC-10, approached that 24-hour mark from engine start to shut down at the end of the day. So, yeah, they can be pretty long, but we do have the luxury of being able to hand the stick over to the other pilot and get up and stretch our legs and grab something to eat and come back.
So what are the benefits of being an Air Force pilot compared to other branches?
This is definitely the service to be in if you want to fly. We have everything from drones to fighters to airlift, but this is our specialty. So if you are looking to be a pilot, I think you're going to get the best training in the world and the most variety and options for your pilot career.
I guess some things to consider. I'm not really saying one's better than the other. Everything Jackie said about the variety of aircraft is absolutely true. But another thing to consider is the fact that Air Force has different locations for bases than the Navy and the Army. And then the Navy, of course, you have the opportunity to fly on aircraft carriers. In the Air Force and the Army, you don't really have that as much. So I think when you're looking into this, just do the research on the different missions that each service does, the different options available to you on which you could fly and what you might be interested in, and then possibly just the location of bases if that's something that matters to you. For some people it does, other people just, they're cool to go wherever they want. So I think anything can be great for you. You just have to do the research and decide what you want, if it's a variety of aircraft or the bases or the missions or the aircraft carriers. So that would be my advice.
It was mentioned about the researching different missions for the branches of flying, and the question was, where would someone find that information?
Your CAF USAF units have all of these people that wear these green suits that come around to visit, that need unit visits for points. And I would tell you that that is a warm body that you can attach yourself to and you can ask questions to. So I would really encourage you to just reach out inside your CAF unit itself, because you would be amazed at what kind of green bag wearing people you can talk to that can tell you, I sat in the cockpit of a C-5, I sat in the cockpit of an F-16, I sat in the cockpit of an MC-12. I have this background, these experiences, and this is what we do. So please, please, please reach out on the CAP side as well.
I just want to thank all of my panelists this evening for their efforts to give back to such a deserving group as the CAP. Also, on behalf of Colonel Wooten, my commander, thanks for all that you're doing out there during COVID, saving lives, emergencies, search and rescue, all that you do, working hard through all of this time at home. Thanks again to everyone, and stay safe out there. Good night.